The story begins with Tori and Kyle Breyer, a couple who have been trying to have a child for a long time, but without success. One night, while they are spending time together, Tori feels a strange vibration shaking the entire house. Alarmed, they both rush outside and discover that something mysterious has crashed near their farm. A glowing spacecraft lights up the area with an intense red glow. Sometime later, we see that the couple now has a baby named Brandon, who brings great happiness to the family. 10 years later, Brandon is playing hide-and-seek with his mother. While searching for him, Tori hears a strange whistling sound that leads her to the barn. There, she gets startled when the boy suddenly pops out from a pile of hay. Shortly after, Kyle, Brandon's father, arrives and scolds him for sneaking into the shed since he considers it dangerous. At school, Brandon amazes his teacher by showing knowledge far beyond his age. But instead of admiring him, several classmates begin mocking him for being different. That same night, while Tori believes her son is already asleep, she quietly paints by herself. However, she starts hearing strange voices coming from the radio while a red light shines through the cracks of the barn. At the same time, Brandon wakes up with his eyes glowing completely red. Suddenly, the boy jumps out of bed and crashes through the window in a single leap, landing outside with a terrifying sound. Alarmed, Tori runs out to look for him and finds the backyard swing moving on its own. Just as she is about to head back inside, she notices a dark figure in the middle of the night and decides to follow it. Soon after, she ends up entering the barn, where she discovers Brandon violently pounding on a metal hatch in the floor. When she tries to approach him, the boy freezes for a few seconds, but then brutally attacks his own mother. Even so, moments later he snaps back to normal, confused and unable to understand how he ended up there. As Tori takes him back to bed, something strange seems to move inside the shed. The next day, Kyle asks Brandon to mow the lawn, but when the mower starts malfunctioning, the boy becomes furious and uses superhuman strength to throw it an impossible distance away. He then hears voices in his head encouraging him to place his hand inside the machine's sharp blade. Brandon slowly does it, but the blade fails to hurt him, leaving his skin completely unharmed. That night, the family celebrates Brandon's birthday at a restaurant. During dinner, his uncle Noah shows him a present, which turns out to be a rifle, but Kyle takes it away and makes it clear that Brandon is still far too young to use it. However, Brandon insists on keeping it and slams the table with tremendous force. At that exact moment, every television in the restaurant suddenly shuts off. Kyle tries to grab him by the arm, but the boy grips the chair with unbelievable strength until Tori finally manages to calm him down. The following morning, Kyle discovers something disturbing. Brandon is casually chewing on a fork. When he pulls it out of the boy's mouth, he sees that the metal has been completely bent and mangled. Meanwhile, Tori finds adult magazines hidden in Brandon's room, though both parents assume it is normal for his age. But shortly afterward, they discover books about human anatomy along with disturbing surgical images, which worries them even more. Later on, during a family camping trip, Kyle tries to talk to Brandon about growing up and becoming a man. That same night, Tori wakes up and realizes that her son has disappeared. At the same time, a girl named Caitlin is startled when her computer suddenly turns on by itself in the middle of the night. Even after unplugging it, the device powers back on and begins playing strange music. Frightened, she looks out the window and thinks she sees someone watching her from the darkness. Shortly after, her mother Erica walks in and insists that nobody is outside. But Caitlin confesses that the person she saw was Brandon. Meanwhile, the Breyers desperately search through the forest looking for their son. However, Brandon suddenly appears behind his mother and calmly says that he had only gone to the bathroom. The next day, Brandon waits for his mother while making strange drawings on a sheet of paper. Among the scribbles are odd symbols and even his own name written in a reddish tone. When he notices Tori approaching, he quickly tries to hide what he was drawing. Later, Kyle hears noises coming from the barn and grabs his rifle, thinking there might be a wolf nearby. But when he walks in, he is surprised to find Brandon staring at the chickens in a very unsettling way. That same night, a loud crashing sound wakes him up and he immediately rushes to the shed. When he arrives, he discovers a horrifying scene. All the chickens have been completely torn apart. Kyle confesses to Tori that he had earlier seen Brandon acting strangely around the animals, making him seriously suspicious of the boy. On top of that, he is convinced that no wolf could have destroyed the door like that. Even so, Tori still refuses to believe that her son could be capable of something so terrible. The following day, during a school activity, the students participate in a trust exercise where Brandon is gently pushed between several classmates while they catch him. But Caitlin suddenly steps aside, causing the boy to slam his head against the ground. The teacher forces the girl to help him back up, even though she does not want to go near him. The moment Caitlin grabs his hand, Brandon squeezes it so hard that he ends up breaking several bones in her hand. After the incident, the principal decides to suspend Brandon for only 2 days, but Erica, Caitlin's mother, demands that he be arrested for what he did to her daughter. That same night, Kyle tells Tori that he found the boy in the barn trying to open the mysterious metal hatch in the basement. He also begins questioning something very strange. Brandon has never bled in his entire life. Shortly afterward, Tori investigates the strange meteorite that crashed in Brightburn 10 years earlier on the exact same night they found Brandon. Meanwhile, the boy begins sleepwalking again and follows the voices inside his head all the way to the barn. Tori notices what is happening and runs after him. When she enters, she finds Brandon floating in the air while muttering unknown words. As she tries to approach him, the boy suddenly falls toward the basement and accidentally cuts his hand, bleeding for the first time in his life. Confused, Brandon asks his mother who he really is and what the metallic object hidden beneath the barn actually is. Tori finally reveals the truth. He did not come from an orphanage, but arrived inside a space capsule that fell from the sky years ago. Even after hearing the entire story, Brandon reacts angrily and storms out, destroying several things along the way. While walking through the rain that night, the boy finally understands the voices in his head. The message says, "Take the world." Soon after, Brandon discovers that he can shoot powerful laser beams from his eyes. Later, Caitlin becomes frightened when Brandon suddenly appears inside her bedroom. The boy tells her that she is the only person who truly understands him. He even brings her flowers and warns her that he will make sure her mother never finds out he was there. Meanwhile, Erica discovers strange symbols drawn across the windows of the diner where she works. Suddenly, the lights begin flickering and the woman walks over in confusion to check what is happening. But at that moment, the light bulbs explode and several shards of glass severely injure one of her eyes, nearly blinding her. Seconds later, a masked figure appears in front of her and begins chasing her throughout the building. Erica tries to defend herself with a baseball bat, but misses and ends up hiding inside a freezer room. Even so, the attacker easily cuts through the metal door using a strange heat vision. Finally, the terrified woman realizes that Brandon is responsible for everything. The next morning, Brandon calmly tells his parents that he has finally accepted the truth about his origins. Meanwhile, at the diner where Erica mysteriously disappeared, the sheriff discovers several symbols drawn across the windows, resembling to letter B's. Later, at school, Brandon talks with his Aunt Marilee, who also works there as the school psychologist. During their conversation, the boy admits that he feels superior to everyone else and claims that his real family doesn't belong in a place as insignificant as that town. When Tori returns home, she begins searching for Brandon because the boy is not answering her calls. As she checks the bathroom, the lights start flickering and outside the house, Brandon appears wearing his mask, although his mother never realizes that he is watching her. At the same time, Marilee hears the motion alarm going off in the backyard of her house. When she steps outside to check, she finds Brandon, who desperately begs her not to tell the sheriff anything about him. He even threatens her, but the woman does not take his words seriously. After the boy leaves, the alarm goes off again, so Marilee heads back outside, leaving the door open behind her. Later, after returning inside, she sends a message to her husband Noah telling him that she is turning off her phone to go to sleep. But as soon as she lies down, Brandon silently appears at the bedroom door and slowly begins walking toward her. However, Noah arrives just in time and finds his wife asleep without noticing anything unusual. While Noah is brushing his teeth, Brandon, still wearing the mask, hides inside the bathroom. Suddenly, he scares his uncle, who eventually finds him hiding inside a closet. Annoyed, Noah scolds him and decides to take him back home. But during the drive, Brandon overhears his uncle thinking about telling everything to his parents, so he puts the mask back on and violently throws Noah against the garage door. Terrified, Noah quickly jumps into his truck to escape. However, just as he tries to drive away, Brandon smashes the vehicle's door with a single blow and causes the engine to shut down. Moments later, the truck's headlights turn on by themselves, and the boy appears floating in front of the windshield. Seconds later, Brandon moves even closer while the truck begins rising off the ground. He then brutally drops the vehicle onto the asphalt, causing a horrific crash. Noah survives for only a few moments. Severely injured and trapped inside the wreckage, he manages to see Brandon drawing strange symbols across the road before dying. Later, Brandon returns home shirtless and tells his parents that he had been playing ball outside. But both Tori and Kyle immediately notice that something is wrong. That night, Kyle remembers the day they found Brandon as a baby. In the middle of the night, he wakes up and discovers something strange. Behind his bedroom door, there appears to be a forest. Tori is no longer beside him either. As he walks confused through the trees, he finds his wife standing next to the alien capsule while holding a baby. But when she turns toward him, a red liquid begins dripping from both the child and Tori's eyes. Fortunately, it is all just a nightmare, and Kyle wakes up in shock because of an urgent phone call. Shortly afterward, he and Tori arrive at the hospital, where Marilee gives them the terrible news that Noah was found dead on the road. She also tells them that Brandon had been at her house shortly before the accident. The next day, Tori informs Brandon that his uncle died the night before, but the boy barely reacts and shows no sadness at all. Kyle, now more convinced than ever that something is terribly wrong, directly accuses Brandon of lying to the entire family. The boy immediately tries to run away, but his father stops him. Brandon then hits him with such force that he sends him crashing into a cabinet, completely destroying it. Even so, Kyle goes upstairs to his son's bedroom and finds the shirt Brandon had hidden away. The clothing is covered in blood. At that moment, the boy suddenly appears behind him, but Kyle manages to hide what he found and tells Brandon that he understands what he is going through. Later, Kyle confesses to Tori that he is convinced Brandon was responsible for Noah's death. However, she still refuses to accept that her son could be a monster. Meanwhile, at the police station, the sheriff discovers that the same symbol found on the diner windows is also painted on the road where Noah lost his life. Despite everything, Kyle still tries to repair his relationship with his son and decides to take him on a trip in hopes of reconnecting with him. Shortly afterward, the sheriff's deputy arrives at the Breyer house and tells Tori that the symbols found at the crime scenes closely resemble Brandon's initials. Even so, she completely refuses to believe that her son could be involved. But after the officer leaves, Tori enters Brandon's room and finds the same symbol drawn over and over again throughout several notebooks. At the same time, during the hunting trip, Kyle takes advantage of a moment when Brandon has his back turned and points his rifle at him. Meanwhile, Tori continues searching through her son's belongings and discovers even more disturbing drawings. The mask he wears at night, the waitress with the injured eye, Noah's accident, and even a drawing of her own face completely destroyed. She also finds images of Brandon destroying the planet with his laser vision while being worshipped by piles of skulls. At that exact moment, Kyle finally pulls the trigger on Brandon, but the boy remains completely still and stares at his father without showing any sign of pain. Terrified, Kyle tries to shoot again, but Brandon suddenly disappears. The man begins running desperately through the forest, only for the boy to appear in front of him seconds later and slam him to the ground. Kyle tearfully begs for mercy, but Brandon shows no emotion at all. Finally, he uses his laser vision to eliminate his father. At the same time, Tori calls Kyle to tell him everything she discovered about Brandon. However, she quickly realizes that the one answering the phone is actually her son. Brandon reveals that Kyle is no longer alive and that he is now coming home to make things right with her. Soon after, Brandon appears outside the farm and begins destroying everything around him. Terrified, Tori tries to hide while the house slowly starts collapsing. When she finally takes shelter beneath a table, she attempts to call emergency services, but the interference prevents the call from going through. Even so, the sheriff suspects that something terrible is happening and rushes toward the farm alongside another officer. Meanwhile, Brandon floats through the house, passing through walls while searching for his mother. When Tori finally manages to reach the front door to ask for help, one of the officers is brutally attacked by the boy. The other officer desperately calls for backup and orders Tori to hide. As she moves through the destroyed hallways, the officer catches sight of Brandon's silhouette outside the house. Suddenly, the figure disappears, and seconds later the woman falls, severely injured in front of Tori. At that moment, Tori realizes that her son is hunting her while flying around the house. To avoid making any noise, she even covers her mouth in fear. When she thinks Brandon has finally gone away, she decides to escape through a window. During her escape, she cuts her hand on a piece of metal and suddenly remembers something important. The material from the spacecraft hidden inside the barn is capable of hurting Brandon. Desperate, Tori runs toward the shed while the boy chases after her. Once inside, she finds Erica's body hanging from the wall in a horrifying way. Trying to stay calm, she grabs a metallic fragment from the spacecraft to use as a weapon and calls out to Brandon, who waits for her in the darkness of the barn. When the boy approaches her, for a brief moment, he almost seems like the same son he used to be. Tori slowly walks toward him and hugs him. But just as she tries to stab him with the metal fragment, Brandon effortlessly stops the attack. Seconds later, the boy bursts through the roof of the barn while carrying his mother in his arms and flies high into the sky. Tori is left severely injured as Brandon holds her in midair. Eventually, the boy lets her fall and disappears just as an airplane passes nearby. The next day, the news reports that a plane crashed into the Briar farm, killing dozens of people. According to the report, the only survivor was Brandon. From that moment on, the boy begins attacking different cities around the world, leaving his symbol behind at every disaster he causes. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think about this movie.